After conquering nearly all of Western Europe, Hitler had only one remaining target: the Soviet Union. This wasn't just a military objective. It was an ideological war to gain living space, Lebensraum, in the East. Although Germany and the Soviet Union had signed the shocking Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939, a non-aggression agreement, it was merely a strategic delay. Both sides knew a confrontation was inevitable. For months, Germany secretly amassed the largest invasion force in the history of warfare along the eastern border. And at dawn on June 22, 1941, Hitler committed the ultimate act of betrayal. 3 million Nazi German soldiers, over 3,000 tanks, and thousands of aircraft simultaneously flooded across the border, launching Operation Barbarossa, the largest single offensive in human history. It was a lightning attack of utter surprise that caught the Soviet Union completely off guard. Operation Barbarossa was executed in the true spirit of Blitzkrieg lightning war. The German forces were divided into three massive army groups: North, Center, and South, with the objectives being the capital Moscow, Leningrad in the north, and the oil fields and grain fields in the south. Initially, the power of the German military was unstoppable. The Soviet army was completely surprised. Stalin had ignored countless intelligence warnings from his own agents. The consequences were catastrophic. Thousands of Soviet aircraft were destroyed on the ground in the first few hours. Millions of Soviet soldiers were encircled, taken prisoner, or killed. German forces advanced hundreds of kilometers into Soviet territory each week. It seemed like a certain victory for Germany. However, even during this early phase, Hitler's first strategic mistakes began to emerge. Instead of focusing all his might on the decisive objective of Moscow, Hitler diverted forces, shifting a large part of Army Group Center South to aid in the siege of Kyiv. This delay, while resulting in a major victory at Kyiv, cost Hitler the golden window to attack Moscow. Despite suffering horrendous losses, the Soviet military began to react. Unlike Western Europe, this was not a war where the enemy would easily surrender. The Soviet people fought with the will to defend their motherland. Factories were dismantled and transported by train thousands of kilometers eastward, continuing to produce weapons. However, the biggest challenge to Germany was not the Soviet army, but geography and weather. The sheer vastness of the Soviet Union stretched German supply lines perilously thin. Tanks and trucks became hopelessly bogged down on muddy roads after heavy rains. And then, General Winter arrived. In late October and early November 1941, temperatures plummeted to below -30 degrees Celsius. German troops were not equipped with adequate winter clothing, ammunition froze, and the oil and lubricants in tank engines seized up. Blitzkrieg demanded speed, but the frost slowed everything down, and eventually, brought it to a grinding halt. In December 1941, with German forces only a few dozen kilometers from Moscow, the Soviet army, reinforced by seasoned Siberian divisions, launched a massive counteroffensive. The German forces, exhausted and frozen, were pushed back. For the first time in World War II, the Nazi German army was forced to retreat on a large scale. Operation Barbarossa had failed to achieve its critical goal, defeating the Soviet Union before winter. Although Germany still occupied vast territories, they were now bogged down in a protracted war of attrition, exactly what Hitler had tried to avoid. The failure at the gates of Moscow changed the course of the war. It proved that the German war machine was not invincible and opened up the bloody four-year Eastern Front, where the fate of World War II was ultimately decided.